Fear doesn't always announce itself with screams. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a glance, a creak, a breath held too long. Tonight, you're about to hear 11 true horror stories drawn from places people thought were safe, until they weren't. These aren't tales polished for books or movies. They're moments that happened and left someone changed forever. A knock at midnight, a shape outside the window that shouldn't have been there, a voice calling from the dark, using your name. Each story is a reminder that fear can slip into the ordinary without warning. So if the room feels colder or the silence grows heavy as you listen, that's no accident. That's what happens when the stories are real. Lean in. The night is just beginning.
The street lamp's feeble glow barely reached the mansion's driveway, but the darkness felt alive, wrapping around me like a cold hand as I stepped out of the car. It was early evening. The city's hum, distant, swallowed by the opulence of this wealthy neighborhood. I was trapped in a life I didn't choose, controlled by my partner, who sat behind the wheel, his eyes scanning the shadows. Tonight's job felt different. A high-paying client, a big fish, he'd called it, his voice greedy as we messaged the man for half an hour. The address led us here to a house that loomed like a predator, its windows black, its silence deafening. I clutched my phone, the screen dim, and sent a final message to the client. "I'm here." No reply came, and in that moment, I knew something was terribly wrong. My partner's car idled behind me, a lifeline I couldn't trust as I approached the mansion's front door. The air was thick, with the scent of jasmine from manicured hedges, but it couldn't mask the sour tang of my fear. This wasn't my first house. My partner had pushed me into this work months ago, each job a gamble with my safety. But this place felt like a trap. The house was grand, its stone facade carved with intricate patterns, yet it seemed abandoned, untouched by life. The door, heavy oak with a frosted glass panel, gleamed under the faint streetlight, its elegance a lie that made my skin crawl. I knocked, the sound swallowed by the night, and felt a jolt when the door shifted, already ajar. My breath hitched the hairs on my neck, standing rigid. Why was it open? My partner climbed out of the car, his footsteps crunching on the gravel, and stood beside me, his presence more threat than comfort. "Go in," he said, his voice low, impatient. I pushed the door wide, the hinges silent, and stepped into a darkness that felt like stepping into a grave. The house was wrong, every inch of it, screaming danger. A short hallway opened into a vast living room, its high ceilings lost in shadow. A fireplace blazed at the center, its flames casting a warm glow that clashed with the chill seeping into my bones. The fire was the only sign of life, its light dancing on polished hardwood floors, but the room was barren. No furniture, no rugs, no paintings, just empty walls staring back like hollow eyes. From where I stood, frozen in the doorway, I could see nearly the entire space, and the absence of anything human made my pulse race. To my left, a doorway yawned, its interior swallowed by a darkness so thick it seemed to pulse. I couldn't tear my eyes from it. A primal instinct warning me to stay away. My partner stepped past me, his boots echoing in the emptiness, and I wanted to scream for him to stop, but my voice was trapped, a prisoner of my fear. He moved toward the dark doorway, his silhouette shrinking against the firelight, and I felt the house watching us waiting. What was this place? The client had said he was upstairs working on his computer, but the silence was absolute, unbroken by the hum of electronics or the shuffle of footsteps. I clutched my phone, checking for a reply, but the screen showed nothing, the signal weak, as if the house itself blocked the outside world. My partner reached the doorway, peering into its depths, and I saw his shoulders stiffen, his body recoiling as if struck. "Hello?" He called, his voice cracking, echoing into the void. "Hello!" He shouted again, louder, but the darkness didn't answer. I took a step forward, my curiosity warring with my terror, and then he turned his face pale, his eyes wide with something I'd never seen in him fear. He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising, and shoved me toward the door. "Move!" he hissed, his voice raw, and my legs obeyed before my mind could catch up. I stumbled out the cold night air slapping my face and sprinted to the car, my heart pounding as if it would burst. We didn't speak. Not at first. The car roared to life, tires skidding on the gravel as we peeled out of the driveway, the mansion shrinking in the rearview mirror. My hands trembled, my breath shallow as the city lights grew closer, a frail promise of safety. We stopped at an all-night pharmacy, its fluorescent glow a stark contrast to the house's shadows. I sat in the passenger seat, my mind replaying the empty room, the fire, the doorway. What was in there? I asked, my voice barely audible, afraid of the answer. My partner stared ahead, his knuckles white on the wheel, and spoke slowly, each word heavy with dread. "An air mattress," he said, "with 2 people on it, sleeping." My blood ran cold. Sleeping. In that house, on a flimsy mattress, in a room, swallowed by darkness. Were they alive? Drugged. Something worse. The image burned into my mind, a puzzle with no solution, only terror. The house haunts me still. I don't do that work anymore, but the memory of that night clings to me, a shadow I can't shake. I see the open door in my dreams, feel the fire's false warmth. Hear the silence that wasn't silent at all. What was that place? A trap, a crime scene, something beyond human understanding. I'll never know, but I know this. I escaped something that night, something that wanted me to stay. The stuffed dog stared at me from the foot of my bed, its plastic eyes glinting in the moonlight like they held a secret. I was 5 alone in the dark, my brother asleep above me on the bunk bed. Arabella Mom called her a handmade toy stuffed with old tights. But tonight, she wasn't just a toy. She moved her fabric rustling, and a man's voice, calm, warm, impossible, whispered, "You're a good boy." It wasn't my dad, and it wasn't God. It was something else, something that knew me, and it terrified me to my core. I was born in 1987, a scrawny kid sharing a cramped room with my older brother in our first house. The place was small, its rooms stuffed to the brim with my parents hoarding boxes of clothes, stacks of magazines, and toys spilling from every corner. Our bunk bed was my world, me on the bottom, my brother snoring above. At the foot of my bed sat Arabella, a stuffed Afghan dog Mom had crafted with care. She was huge to my 5-year-old eyes, her pointy face framed by long, matted fur, her plastic eyes glued on unblinking. Mom stuffed her with old tights, giving her a distinct crinkle when moved a sound I knew by heart. Arabella was my guardian, or so I thought, until the nights when she became something else. My mom talked about her father often. My grandfather, who died in 1985, 2 years before I was born. I never met him, but his absence hung heavy in our house. She'd mark his birthday, her voice soft with regret, saying she wished she'd told him she loved him one last time. His stories filled my imagination. A kind man, a worker, a ghost in our family's heart. I didn't connect him to Arabella then, but looking back, I wonder if her presence stirred something, a bridge to a world I couldn't see. Those nights' sleep was a battle. I'd lie awake, the room's shadows twisting under the glow of a street lamp, filtering through our thin curtains. My brother's snores were a steady rhythm, but the house was never quiet. Floorboards groaned, pipes hummed, and sometimes I'd hear that crinkle, Arabella's tights shifting as if she'd stirred. At first, I thought I'd bumped her, my legs restless under the blanket. But one night, the sound came unprompted, a slow, deliberate rustle from the foot of the bed. I froze, my breath, shallow, eyes locked on her silhouette. Her head was tilted, those plastic eyes catching the light, staring right at me. I pulled the blanket over my head, heart pounding, telling myself it was a dream. But the rustle came again, closer, like she'd inched up the bed. I didn't dare look. I buried my face in the pillow, the scent of detergent grounding me, but the fear was a living thing clawing at my chest. Then it happened, a voice deep and gentle from the darkness. "You're a good boy," it said, clear as if someone sat beside me. My dad was away stationed in the Falklands with the Air Force, and no one else was in the house. I trembled, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for it to speak again. But silence followed, heavy and oppressive. The rustle stopped, and somehow I slept exhaustion, winning over terror. It wasn't a one-time thing. Another night, I woke with a desperate need to reach my parents' room. The crinkle came again, Arabella's form looming in the dark. I made myself small, curling into a ball, eyes shut, praying for silence. The voice returned softer this time, saying, "Don't worry, or maybe you're okay." It was soothing, almost kind, but that made it worse. Kindness from the unknown was unnatural wrong. I waited, heart hammering, until the rustle faded. I bolted, tiptoeing past Arabella, her eyes tracking me in the moonlight, and dove into my parents' bed, safe in their warmth. The worst night, I was playing alone in our room. Blocks scattered across the floor. The crinkle came unprovoked, and I glanced at Arabella. Her head was turned, those eyes locked on mine, unblinking, alive. I gasped, scrambling under the covers, my pulse a drum in my ears. The voice spoke again, low and calm. You're okay." I stayed hidden, blanket a flimsy shield, until Mom called me for dinner. I never told her what happened, but I said something strange once, blurting, "Sometimes I hear God talking to me." She laughed, ruffling my hair, but I saw a flicker of worry in her eyes. I didn't know how to explain. It wasn't God, wasn't anything I understood. I kept it secret, even from my brother. The room felt tainted, its clutter no longer comforting. Arabella stayed at the foot of my bed, her presence a constant weight. I avoided looking at her at night, turning my back, but I'd feel her stare, those plastic eyes boring into me. Mom's stories about my grandfather circled in my mind. Was it him, watching over me? The thought was comforting, but the voice's eerie calm didn't fit the kind man she described. It was too otherworldly, too aware. Years later, at 37, I still think about those nights. We moved from that house, but Arabella came with us tucked in a box. I saw her once in storage, her fur-faded eyes dull, but I couldn't touch her. The memory of that crinkle, that voice, is etched in me. I've tried to rationalize it. Imagination, a kid's fear of the dark. But the voice was too real, too specific. Was it my grandfather tied to Mom's grief? Or something else, using Arabella as a vessel drawn to a child's open mind? I don't talk about it, except here, where the words feel safe. But I wonder if it's still out there, waiting for another night, another child to whisper its secrets. In the quiet of my own room, I sometimes hear that rustle, and I pray it's just the wind, not Arabella, not that voice calling me back. The kitchen was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hold your breath, waiting for the world to crack open. 20 years ago, I stood in a century-old house in Corinth, New York, my hands sweaty on a recorder, chasing ghosts I wasn't sure I believed in. I was a paranormal investigator, a hobbyist with a knack for gadgets and a curiosity about the unseen. That night, in a family's kitchen, I found something, or it found me. Its voice still haunts my dreams, a whisper that carries a name I'll never forget, Nutad. The house belonged to a woman named Ellen, a single mother whose fear had drawn us there. She'd called my team, her voice trembling over the phone, convinced her teenage daughter was possessed. The girl had changed mood swings, silences, a darkness in her eyes that wasn't there before. Ellen's family had owned the house for generations, a sprawling Victorian with creaking floors and secrets in its walls. 2 people had died there. Ellen's mother, right in the kitchen, and an uncle years before. Rumors whispered of witchcraft in the attic, rituals long forgotten, but never fully gone. We'd investigated the house before capturing faint voices, fleeting shadows, but nothing like what waited for us that night. We set up in the kitchen a cozy room with faded floral wallpaper and a heavy oak table. Ellen sat across from me, her hands clasped tight, her eyes darting to the corners. My team, 2 friends with cameras and meters, hovered nearby their equipment, humming softly. The air was warm, thick, with the scent of old wood and coffee. But it felt fragile, like a storm was gathering, just out of sight. I placed the recorder on the table, its red light glowing, and started the EVP session, asking simple questions into the void. Is anyone here? Can you tell us your name? Silence answered, heavy and unbroken. But I kept going, my voice steady, despite the chill creeping up my spine. Half an hour passed, and we were ready to wrap up. The meters showed nothing. The cameras caught only dust. Ellen's shoulders sagged, her hope fading, and I felt a pang of guilt for not finding answers. You're wasting her time, I thought. But then it happened. A coldness, sharp and sudden, pooling under the table. My legs went numb, my breath clouding in the air, though the room was still warm above. I grabbed my one-touch thermometer, my hands shaking, and scanned the space. Above the table, 68 degrees, below 42. The drop was impossible, unnatural, like something had slipped into our world, chilling the air with its presence. Ellen gasped, her eyes wide, her hands gripping the table. "It's her," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's my mother." I nodded, my heart pounding, and leaned closer, the recorder still running. "Ellen," I said, my voice low, "if it's her, ask her something only she'd know, something personal." She hesitated, her gaze distant, then spoke her words soft, but heavy with memory. "Mom, do you remember the squirrel we fed every day? The one by the oak tree. What did we call him?" The room seemed to hold its breath, the air thick, pressing against my skin. I stared at the recorder, its light steady, willing it to catch something, anything. Seconds stretched into eternity, and then we moved on, asking more questions, the cold fading as quickly as it came. We packed up, promising Ellen we'd review the tapes, but the weight of that moment lingered a knot in my chest I couldn't shake. I drove home in silence, the recorder in my bag, its contents a mystery I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. A week later, alone in my basement, I reviewed the audio. The hum of my headphones filled my ears, the room dark, except for the glow of my laptop. I listened to our questions. Ellen's voice, the silence between. Then, after her question about the squirrel, I saw it a spike in the waveform, a sound I hadn't heard in the kitchen. I cranked the volume, my pulse racing, and played it again. A voice, faint but clear, rasped through the static. "New Tad." I froze my breath, catching the word echoing in my mind. I played it again and again, each time more certain. It was a woman's voice, old and weary, but unmistakable. New Tad, the name of the squirrel Ellen, and her mother had fed a secret only they shared. I drove to Ellen's house. Days later, my hands sweaty on the wheel, the audio file burning a hole in my pocket. She welcomed me in her eyes, tired but hopeful. Her daughter upstairs, quieter now, but still struggling. We sat at the same table. The kitchen unchanged its warmth, a stark contrast to the cold I'd felt before. I pulled out a piece of paper, wrote New Tad on it, and hid it in my hand. "Listen to this," I said, playing the clip. The voice filled the room thin. but piercing, and Ellen's face crumbled. She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks, her body shaking with sobs. I slid the paper across the table, and she broke down completely, clutching it like a lifeline. "That's her," she whispered, her voice raw. "That's my mother." We talked for hours, Ellen sharing memories of her mother, the squirrel they'd loved, the oak tree, now gone. The EVP was proof, a bridge to someone she'd lost, but it was more than that. It was a warning, a reminder that the house held more than memories. The attic, the rumors of witchcraft, the girl's darkness, they were pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. I left that night, the recorder heavy in my bag, Ellen's tears etched in my mind. The case ended, but the voice stayed with me, a whisper that followed me through the years. Long ago, my mentor, an old investigator named Carl, told me a story I'd dismissed. He'd recorded a voice in an abandoned mill, a man's plea for help, clear as day on tape, but silent in the room. The mill had burned decades before killing workers, their screams trapped in the walls. Carl said, "Some places hold on to voices, replaying them like broken records." I laughed it off, young and skeptical. But now I wonder, was Nutad's voice trapped in Ellen's house? Or was it something else? Something that used her mother's memory to speak? I don't investigate anymore. The equipment's in storage. The case is closed. But every time I hear a whisper, a faint sound in the dark, I'm back in that kitchen. The cold under my feet, the voice in my ears. It's still there, waiting for someone to listen. Nutad wasn't just a name, it was a door, and I'm not sure it ever closed. The air in my new bedroom felt wrong heavy, like it was pressing against my skin, watching me. We'd just moved to a house in South Florida, 40 miles south of Tampa, a quiet suburb where palm trees swayed under a relentless sun. I was a sophomore, barely 16, drowning in the haze of ADHD meds and antidepressants that dulled my edges but left me bone-tired. My room was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place to crash after school. But something about it set my nerves on edge. My rescue dog, a scruffy mutt with soulful eyes, felt it too. She'd slink and tail low and bolt out, as if chased by something I couldn't see. One afternoon, she froze, staring at my closet, her body trembling like a leaf in a storm. I laughed it off, blaming her past, but deep down, I knew something was off. Something that would soon crawl into my dreams and leave marks I couldn't explain. I was a skeptic. Always had been. Ghosts, spirits, all that stuff was for horror movies, not real life. But this house, with its creaky floors and sun-bleached walls, had a way of making me question. My dog's behavior was the first clue. She'd pad into my room, her nails clicking softly on the hardwood, and I'd greet her, expecting her to jump on the bed like she did at our old place. Instead, she'd freeze eyes locked on the closet, her body shaking as if she saw something I couldn't. One day, she just stood there, staring, a low whimper escaping her throat. I checked the closet. Nothing but clothes, a skateboard, and a pile of sneakers. "You're fine, girl," I said, petting her, but she bolted, her tail tucked, refusing to stay. If she did climb onto my bed, she'd leap off within minutes, even mid-pet, as if the air itself repelled her. I told myself it was her rescue trauma, but the knot in my stomach grew tighter each time she fled. By Christmas, the nightmares started, and they weren't just dreams. I'd come home from school, exhausted from the meds that made my head feel like it was wrapped in cotton, and crash on my bed, the room dim with late afternoon light filtering through the blinds. The first nightmares were subtle, almost normal. I'd be lying in bed, my body heavy, my mind foggy, when a crushing weight would settle on my chest, pinning me down. I'd try to sit up, but my limbs wouldn't obey my legs, useless, as if bound by invisible chains. I'd struggle my breath, shallow, my heart pounding, until I'd jerk awake, gasping. The room unchanged, but somehow colder. I blamed the meds, drowsiness, and nightmares were listed side effects, right? But these felt too real, too precise. I'd wake with a lingering pressure on my chest, my skin clammy, the air thick with a presence I couldn't name. Then the nightmares changed, growing darker, more vivid, like a movie I couldn't escape. Around January, they took on a new form, one that still chills me when I think about it. I'd wake in my dream, but I wasn't in my body. I was standing in the middle of my room, watching myself sleep, every detail perfect. The red shirt crumpled on the floor, my backpack by the door, the faded band posters on the wall. It was my room, but wrong. The air heavy with a silence that pressed against my ears. I'd see my comforter compress, sinking into my chest, as if something heavy sat there, invisible but real. My sleeping self would jolt my head, twitching on the pillow, and I'd feel a sharp sting on my face, a phantom blow that echoed in my waking body. I'd try to move, to scream, to wake myself, but I was trapped, a spectator to my own torment. The closet door loomed in the corner, its shadows deeper, as if it hid something, watching, waiting. The marks started appearing soon after. I'd wake from these nightmares, my heart racing, my skin slick with sweat, and find red welts on my neck, sometimes scratches, faint, but undeniable. One morning, the marks were so clear, I could trace the outline of fingers, 4 distinct lines, curving around my throat. My mom noticed her face, creasing with worry. "Why are you such a rough sleeper?" she'd ask, her voice soft but edged with concern. I didn't have an answer. I'd check my nails, short, blunt, no way I did this myself. The meds, I thought maybe they're messing with my head, amplifying my dreams into something physical. But how could a dream leave marks? I started sleeping with the light on the closet door shut tight, but the nightmares didn't stop. They came almost every night, a relentless cycle that lasted until I graduated high school. My dog never changed. Even as the nightmares grew worse, she refused to stay in my room. She'd linger at the threshold, her eyes darting to the closet, her body tense. I'd call her, coax her with treats, but she'd back away, her ears flat, as if the room itself was a threat. I told my mom about the dreams, the marks, but not the out-of-body feeling that felt too crazy to admit. She suggested cutting back on the meds, but the doctor said they were necessary. I tried sleeping in the living room once, hoping a change of scenery would help, but the nightmares followed, though fainter, less vivid. When I joined the military, moving to a ship, and later an apartment, the nightmares stopped, as if tied to that room, that house. I visited home a few times after sleeping in my old bed, but the dreams never returned. My dog, though she still won't stay in that room. She'll pace outside, her eyes fixed on the door, and I wonder what she sees, what I'll never understand. The marks are gone, but the fear lingers. I'm still a skeptic, mostly, but that room changed me. I can't explain the weight, the scratches, the way my dog knew something was wrong. Was it the meds, my mind playing tricks? Or was something there, something that left its mark on me? Body and soul. I don't sleep in that room anymore, but I feel it, watching, waiting in the dark. The night was alive with whispers, not from the wind, but from something older, something that stood just beyond the trees. I was 26, standing on my best friend S's family land, the air thick with unease. Her dogs whimpered their tails low, and I felt it, a gaze heavy and unyielding, boring into us from the darkness. S's uncle gripped a baseball bat, his knuckles white, but we all knew the truth. The tall man was out there, again watching, as he had for generations, and no weapon could touch him. I'm 26, the same age as my best friend S, whose full name is a secret she guards like a talisman. She's of Romani descent, her life shaped by a family scarred by abandonment and pain. Her parents, abusive and absent, left her to grow up with her uncle on a sprawling piece of land dotted with mobile home houses and plots owned by her kin. The land is a patchwork of woods and fields, a place of beauty by day, but dread by night. S has lived there for years, and since childhood, she's told me stories of strange happenings, lights flickering voices in the wind, and him, the tall man, a faceless figure who watches her family, unrelenting across decades. The first time S saw him, she was 6, padding to the kitchen for water in the dead of night. Through the patio door, she glimpsed a figure so tall, his head was beyond the frame, only his shoulders visible. She called her mother, who froze, her face drained of color. The family dog whined a low, mournful sound as the man stood motionless, his presence a weight that crushed the air. After minutes, he backed away, melting into the dark, leaving no trace. S's mother swore it was him, the same figure her own aunts and uncles had seen as children, a shadow that haunted their family for generations. I didn't believe it at first. I'd seen odd things myself, flickers in corners, a chill in empty rooms, but a man stalking a family for decades. It sounded like folklore, a tale to scare kids. Yet S's stories were consistent, her fear raw. Her grandmother's house, her brother's plots, even her parents' old place, all bore his mark. He appeared randomly in rain or snow, summer or winter, always at night, always watching from specific spots, the edge of a field, the tree line, a window's reflection. His face was never clear, a blur of shadow, but his height was unmistakable, towering over any man. The strangest part, he never approached, never spoke, just watched. Yet his presence brought a suffocating dread, as if he fed on their fear. My first encounter came 3 years ago, visiting S at her uncle's. We were outside, the night warm, the stars hidden by clouds. Her dogs, usually playful, grew restless, their ears pinned back, eyes fixed on the woods. S tensed her voice low. He's here. I followed her gaze, seeing nothing but darkness, but the air shifted heavy with a malice I couldn't name. Her uncle, a heavy sleeper, woke suddenly, grabbing a bat and stepping outside, trembling. As he moved, I saw it, a silhouette, impossibly tall, motionless in the underbrush. He didn't run, didn't flinch, just stood, his form dissolving into the foliage as we stared. The dogs fell silent, and we retreated inside, hearts pounding the night now, an enemy. The second time was at her grandmother's. S and I were in the yard, laughing, when her cousin gasped, pointing to a plough across the field. There he was, still as stone, facing us. Her cousin clutched her chest, panic rising, and S's uncles rushed out shouting. But he was gone, vanished, without a step. No footprints, no broken branches, just the lingering weight of his gaze. The third time I was with S at her uncle's again, the dogs whining their bodies pressed against us. We saw him near the patio, his shoulders filling the frame, and when her uncle charged outside, bat raised, he faded into the trees, leaving only silence. S's family has tried everything. They called the police twice, but the Romani stigma meant they were dismissed. The investigation dropped. Surveillance cameras failed, capturing only static or darkness, even under floodlights. Her cousin once chased him with friends, but he slipped away, his movements fluid, unnatural. The family debates his nature. Some say he's a stalker, a pervert with uncanny skill. But others like S believe he's not human. His age defies logic. If he's the same man from her aunt's childhood, he'd be ancient, yet he moves with eerie grace. No DNA, no tracks, no evidence, just dread a shadow that binds their bloodline. I've felt him too, that discomfort, like eyes drilling into my soul. The dogs panic. Is the worst their instincts sharper than ours? S's favorite uncle jokes he's a degenerate, but his eyes betray fear. I've scoured lore, spirits, jinn curses, but nothing fits. He doesn't attack, doesn't communicate, yet his presence is a violation, a claim on their lives. Is he tied to the land, to their Romani roots, or something older, drawn to their pain? I don't sleep easy at S's anymore. The wood's a wall of secrets. I hear her stories, see her fear, and wonder if he watches me now, waiting for the night I'm alone. The tall man's shadow stretches across their lives, and I fear one day I'll see his face, and it'll know my name too. The house was too still, as if it knew something I didn't, as if it was waiting for me to hear it. I've lived in our small, creaky home for years, sharing it with my daughter and her father, our lives woven into its walls. It's a place of warmth, her drawings on the fridge, his tools scattered in the garage, the hum of our routine. But lately, something else has crept in, something that wears my daughter's voice and moves through our home like a thief in the night. It started with a sound, a flicker of light, and now it's unraveling everything I thought I knew. Our house is old, its wooden floors worn smooth by decades of footsteps. The living room opens to a narrow kitchen where I spend evenings cooking the radio, playing softly. My daughter's room is down a short hallway, mine across from it, a space cluttered with books and blankets. Her father sleeps in the basement, his snores drifting up through the vents. We've had odd moments before. Keys misplaced a glass, left on the counter. I swore I'd washed, but nothing like this. A year ago, the air began to change heavy, with a presence I couldn't name, a feeling that prickled my skin and kept me awake. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of ordinary evening that lulls you into comfort. I was in the living room, curled on the couch with a book, the lamp casting a warm glow. My daughter was in her room, headphones on, working on a school project. Her father was out, probably at the hardware store, his truck rumbling down the street. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the fridge. Then I heard it, footsteps soft but deliberate, moving down the hallway toward the kitchen. I smiled, assuming it was my daughter, maybe grabbing a snack. "You okay, sweetie?" I called, my voice light. A muffled reply came her voice, but softer, almost lost in the air. I set my book down, listening harder. The footsteps continued slow and steady, and then a light flared in the kitchen. A sharp, white glow, like a phone flashlight sweeping across the walls. I stood, my heart quickening, and called again. "Hey, you need something?" No answer. Just the light, flickering, then vanishing. I walked to the kitchen, expecting to see her rummaging through the fridge. But it was empty. The counters were bare, the sink still, the darkness complete. My stomach twisted. "She's in her room," I told myself, but my feet were already moving toward her door. I knocked softly, then pushed it open. There she was, sprawled on her bed, headphones still on her laptop, glowing with a half-finished essay. "Did you just go to the kitchen?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. She looked up, confused, shaking her head. "I've been here the whole time, Mom, working on this dumb project." Her eyes were clear, her tone honest. I forced a smile, but my hands were cold, my pulse racing. I checked the house, front door locked, windows secure, no sign of anyone. But I'd heard her seen that light. It wasn't a dream, wasn't my imagination. Something had walked through my home, using her voice. The next morning, I tried to shake it off, blaming exhaustion, maybe a trick of the light. But the feeling lingered, a shadow that followed me through the day. I noticed it more now, a strange energy in the house, like a current running beneath the floorboards. It wasn't constant. Sometimes it vanished for a week, leaving me to wonder if I'd imagined it. Other times, it was there every night, thick and oppressive, strongest in my room. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling eyes on me unseen, but close. My daughter noticed it too, though she didn't say it outright. She'd linger in the living room, avoiding her room after dark, her usual chatter quieter. Her father had his own story, one he shared reluctantly. A few months back, he'd heard me calling him from the kitchen, late at night, my voice sharp and urgent. "Come here quick," he'd heard, clear as day. He'd rushed upstairs, only to find me asleep, in bed, the house silent. He hadn't told me, not wanting to worry me, but now, after my story, his face paled. "It sounded just like you," he said, his voice low. "I thought you were in trouble." We sat in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. Something was mimicking us, slipping into our voices, our home, our lives. The incidents piled up, small but relentless. A cup moved from the counter to the table. A door left ajar. I'd sworn I'd closed. The energy shifted, sometimes gone, sometimes so heavy I could barely breathe. I started checking the locks obsessively, keeping the lights on, but it didn't help. One night, I woke to that same energy, stronger, like a hand pressing on my chest. I lay still, listening, and heard it again. Her footsteps, her voice soft and distant, calling from the kitchen. "Mom." I didn't move, didn't answer, my heart pounding. I knew she was asleep, knew it wasn't her. The voice came again, closer, right outside my door. "Mom." I pulled the blanket tighter, my eyes fixed on the darkness, waiting for it to stop. I started researching, desperate for answers. But I'm not religious. Not the type to call a priest or burn sage. The internet offered theories. Poltergeists, doppelgangers, restless spirits. But none felt right. This thing wasn't just a ghost. It was deliberate cunning, wearing my daughter's voice like a mask. I asked her if she felt anything, if she'd heard or seen something strange. She shrugged, her eyes avoiding mine. "It's just the house, Mom. It's old." But I saw the fear in her, the way she clung to me at night, her usual bravery fading. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, a story from my childhood I'd buried. She'd grown up in a house like ours, old and creaky, where she'd heard her brother's voice calling her name at night. She'd follow it, only to find him asleep, the house empty. One night, she saw a shadow in the hallway, mimicking his shape, his walk, but wrong too tall, too thin. She never told him, scared it would make it real, but she left that house, and never looked back. I'd laughed it off as a kid, but now it felt like a warning. Was this thing in our home the same a mimic that fed on our trust? I don't know what it is, but it's still here. The footsteps come some nights, the light flickers in the kitchen, and that energy lingers, watching, waiting. I keep my daughter close, check her room before she sleeps, but I can't shake the fear that it's learning, growing bolder. It knows our voices, our habits, our home. I'm not sure how to fight it, not sure I can. All I know is that every time I hear her call my name, I hold my breath, praying it's really her. The rain battered my apartment windows, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the city's hum. But it was the sudden darkness that set my nerves alight. The power cut plunged us into a void, the TV flickering out mid-sentence, leaving me and my friends in a studio apartment lit only by the faint glow of our phones. It was 2002, a rainy night that should have been ordinary laughter stories, the kind of bonding that happens when the world stops. But one friend's face changed, his eyes widening as if something had seized his soul, and in that moment the air turned thick, heavy, with a presence I couldn't name. He rose, his movements slow, deliberate, and walked toward the kitchen, his gaze fixed on something beyond the glass door. I didn't know then that what he saw would haunt me for decades, a shadow that grew with my fear. We were a tight group. 5 of us sprawled across the apartment's worn furniture, trading stories to pass the time. The studio was small, a single room, with a kitchen tucked behind a sliding glass door, its frosted panes reflecting our silhouettes in the dim light. The rain's rhythm was soothing at first, a backdrop to our chatter. But when the power died, the silence felt wrong, too deep, like the apartment itself was listening. My friend, let's call him Jake, had been mid-joke when his laughter stopped, his face draining of color. He stood his chair, scraping the floor, and moved toward the kitchen, his steps heavy, as if drawn by an unseen force. The glass door glided open, revealing a narrow hallway, lined with cupboards, the sink barely visible in the gloom. He stopped staring at the counter, his body rigid, his breath shallow. Curiosity pulled me forward, my heart thudding, and I peered over his shoulder, my other friend close behind. The kitchen was empty, but the air felt charged like a storm about to break. What was he seeing? I strained my eyes, searching the shadows, and then I saw it. A figure tall and thin, leaning against the countertop. He wore a high-brimmed hat, his face obscured, but I felt his grin, a twisted curve that sent ice down my spine. A walking stick rested in his hand, its tip lost in the darkness, and he didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, radiating a quiet menace. My friend beside me tensed, her breath catching, and I knew she saw it too. Jake didn't blink his eyes, locked on the figure, as if moving would break some fragile spell. We backed away at the glass door, sliding shut, and returned to the living room, our voices resuming, but hollow, forced. No one mentioned it, not then, but the silence between our words was louder than the rain. I broke it. Finally, my voice barely steady. You all saw it too, didn't you? No one answered, their eyes avoiding mine, and that was enough. We saw a man who wasn't there, a shadow that grinned and waited. The night passed, but the figure lingered in my mind. We didn't speak of it again, not that night, not for years. Life moved on, college jobs, new cities, but the memory of that grin that had stayed buried in my thoughts, a splinter I couldn't pull free. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a shared hallucination born of darkness and boredom. But deep down, I knew better. Then a month ago, it happened again. I was back in a similar apartment, visiting friends, 7 of us, gathered for a late-night catch-up. The hour grew late, the group thinning as people drifted to sleep, leaving me and one friend awake, our voices low in the quiet. The room was warm, the city's glow seeping through the blinds, but a chill crept over me, sudden and sharp. I glanced toward the kitchen, its glass door half open, and there he was, the same figure, hat tilted, stick in hand, leaning against the counter. His grin was wider now, sharper, and I felt my fear swell, a living thing that fed him. He grew not in size, but in presence, his shadow stretching across the room, swallowing the light. He's feeding on me, I realized, my heart pounding, my breath shallow. The longer I stared, the larger he loomed, his grin twisting into something cruel, almost gleeful. My friend saw my face, his voice cutting through the haze. "You okay?" he asked, but his eyes flicked to the kitchen, and I knew he saw it too. I couldn't speak, my throat tight, my mind racing. The figure didn't move, didn't approach, but his presence was a weight pressing against my chest. My fear, his fuel. I remembered a story another friend, a tough street guy, had told that morning, how he'd seen the same figure frozen in terror, unable to move. Paul, another friend, had a similar tale, running from a shadow in a field. It was the same entity, I was sure, a thing that thrived on fear, that grew with it. I forced the words out, my voice shaking, but firm. I'm not afraid of you. I didn't believe it, not fully, but I said it again, louder, meaning it this time. I don't fear you. His grin faltered, his form wavering, and he dissolved, fading into a misty nothingness, leaving out only the echo of that smile. The apartment felt lighter, but I wasn't free. I haven't seen him since, but I feel him sometimes in quiet moments, in dark corners. What is he? A ghost? A demon? Something older? Why does he come? And what does he want? He only vanishes when I face him, when I choke down my fear. But it's never easy. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw, what we all saw. The rain still falls in my dreams. The glass door slides open, and he's there, grinning, waiting for my fear to feed him again. The wolf's eyes burned like emerald flames, locking onto mine in the frozen silence of the British Columbia night. I was 13 alone in the hot tub on our deck, the snow knee-deep around our rural home. Its silver coat shimmered under the stars, too massive to be natural, and as it moved toward the barn, my breath caught. Halfway through its form, twisted, rearing up into a towering, human-like shape, broad-shouldered and wrong. It wasn't a wolf anymore. It was something ancient, something that knew I was watching, and it wanted me to see. I was 13, living in a small house nestled in the wilds of rural British Columbia, where the winters buried us in snow, and the nights were so quiet you could hear your own pulse. My family. Mom. Dad, my older brother, and me shared a modest home on land that felt alive, its forests dense with secrets. Our property backed onto acres of untamed wilderness, a mix of pines and cedars that stretched toward the horizon. The barn, a relic from when the land was a schoolhouse for native children under Catholic priests, stood 100 yards from the house, its weathered boards hiding old desks and chairs. The land was older than the stories we told, and it carried a weight I couldn't name. That winter night, I was in the hot tub, on our deck, steam rising into the frigid air, my skin prickling against the cold. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 a.m., the world muffled by fresh snow. I loved these moments, soaking alone, watching the woods, their stillness a comfort. The stars were sharp, the moon a sliver, casting pale light across the paddocks where our horses slept. I was lost in thought, the water's warmth lulling me when movement caught my eye. At the forest's edge, a wolf emerged larger than any I'd seen, its coat a shimmering silver that seemed to glow. Its eyes bright green and piercing met mine, and I froze my heart a drum in my chest. It wasn't just its size, easily twice a normal wolf, that unnerved me. It moved with purpose, not the cautious tread of a predator, but a deliberate stride, as if it owned the land. I watched, breath shallow, as it crossed the paddock, its gaze never wavering. I told myself to relax. Wolves were rare here, but not impossible. Yet something about it felt wrong, like the air had thickened, charged with a presence that pressed against my skin. It reached the barn, its form half lit by a floodlight we kept on for the horses. As it passed through the open door, my stomach dropped. Midway, its body shifted, contorting in a way no animal could. It reared up limbs, elongating shoulders, broadening until it stood nearly 7 feet tall, a human-like figure, massive and shadowed. It rounded the corner toward the open field, but never emerged on the other side, vanishing as if the night had swallowed it whole. I sat there, water cooling around me, my mind racing. The horses hadn't stirred, not a single whinny, which was impossible. They'd bolt at a coyote's scent. I scrambled out, dripping my bare feet, burning on the icy deck, and locked myself inside. My parents were asleep. My brother in our shared room, and I didn't wake them. What could I say? That I'd seen a wolf turn human. I barely slept, replaying the moment, the way its eyes had held mine, knowing I was there. The next morning, I checked the barn, finding no tracks, no sign, just the same old desks, and a chill that lingered in my bones. My brother had his own encounter, though he didn't see the change. He woke one night, feeling watched, and saw a massive wolf outside his window, its green eyes glowing. It walked away unhurried, as if it had all the time in the world. He told me later, his voice low, and we shared a look. Whatever it wasn't just an animal. The property was steeped in strangeness. Closet doors in our room slammed for minutes at a time, no wind to blame. I saw red eyes on my ceiling, once glowing like coals, and hid until dawn. Our barn's windows showed fleeting faces, small, childlike, gone when you blinked. Lights flickered on their own, and footsteps echoed in empty rooms. The land was native ground, sacred and scarred, and we felt it, an undercurrent of something watching, always watching. I've scoured stories since skinwalkers, wendigos, shapeshifters, but none fit perfectly. Skinwalkers are Navajo, not local to BC tribes, and wendigos are grotesque, starved things. This creature was neither deformed nor monstrous, just wrong. Its form too fluid, too deliberate. I told my parents once, and Mom laughed, saying I watched too many horror movies. Dad, quieter, mentioned the old schoolhouse, how priests forced native kids to pray, stripping their culture. He didn't believe in spirits, but his eyes said otherwise. I never saw the wolf again. But the barn felt tainted, its shadows deeper, its silence heavier. Now, at 30, I live far from that house, but the memory claws at me. I avoid rural nights, the dark, too full of eyes. Was it a guardian tied to the land's pain? A warning showing itself to me, or something darker, drawn to our presence, testing us? My brother and I don't talk about it, but he avoids the old property too. The land holds its secrets, and I fear what else it hides, what other forms it might take, waiting for the next soul to wander too close. In the quiet of a city night, I sometimes feel those green eyes on me, and I know the wolf is still out there, walking, watching, waiting. The darkness outside my apartment wasn't empty. It was alive, staring back through the lens of my camera. I lived alone in a small modern unit on the edge of town, just me and my cat Shadow in a space that should have felt safe. The building was new, all clean lines and smart tech, with security cameras inside and out there, tiny lights blinking like watchful eyes. I relied on them, checking the feeds on my phone when I worked late, a habit born from living in a world that never feels quite secure. But last week, those cameras turned against me, showing me something that wasn't there, or maybe something that was waiting just beyond the light. My apartment was a sanctuary, a one-bedroom haven with a cozy living room, a kitchenette, and a bedroom tucked down a short hall. Shadow ruled the place, his black fur blending into the shadows as he napped on the couch or prowled the windowsill. I worked night shifts at a 24-hour diner, slinging coffee and burgers until dawn, so my days were flipped home by morning, asleep by noon. The cameras were my peace of mind, their feeds a reassurance that no one was lurking while I was gone. The front door camera covered the porch, its motion sensor tied to a bright LED light. Inside, cameras watched the living room and hallway, their infrared lenses capturing every corner. I thought they'd keep me safe. I was wrong. It started. Tuesday night, my shift dragging as usual. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed the camera app, alerting me to motion at the front door. I opened the feed, expecting a raccoon or a stray cat, but the porch was empty, the light off, the night still. I frowned, checking the timestamp, 2:58 a.m. Just a glitch, I thought. But 15 minutes later, another alert. This time, the porch light was on, casting a harsh glow across the concrete. But again, no one was there. I rewound the clip, my heart quickening. The light had been off in the first alert, then on in the second, like someone had flipped a switch. I checked the indoor feeds. Living room, dark hallway, empty shadow, asleep on the couch. Nothing. The alerts kept coming every few minutes, the light flickering on and off, like a signal. By 4:30 a.m., I was on edge, my coworker leaning over to watch the feed. "Look," he said, pointing at a shadow in the corner of the porch, a faint blur that moved just as the light went out. I turned on the camera's floodlight, but the porch was empty. The shadow gone. My skin prickled, a chill settling in my chest. I stayed glued to the app until my shift ended at 7 a.m., the alerts finally stopping. When I got home, the porch light was off, but my TV was on its screen, glowing with static. I'd turned it off before leaving, I was sure. I unplugged it, checked the locks, and tried to sleep. But the unease lingered, a weight I couldn't shake. The week passed quietly, the cameras silent, the light steady. I had a friend, an electrician named Mike, check the wiring on Friday. "It's solid," he said, shrugging. "No shorts, no surges, maybe a software bug." I nodded, wanting to believe him, but the memory of that shadow, that static, gnawed at me. Saturday was my night off, a rare chance to relax. I settled on the couch with Shadow, a movie streaming the apartment, warm and familiar. The world felt normal again, until it wasn't. Around 10 p.m., I heard voices low, muffled, like a conversation, just out of reach. I paused the movie, my heart quickening, and listened. The sound came from the bedroom, faint but clear, like two people talking in hushed tones. Shadow's ears twitched, his eyes fixed on the hallway, his body tense. I stood my phone in hand and checked the indoor feed. Hallway, dark bedroom, empty. The voices stopped the silence, heavier now, like it was pressing against my skin. I brushed it off, thinking it was neighbors or a car outside, and sank back into the couch, the movie's noise a comfort. Then it came again, louder, closer. "Hey," a voice said, sharp and familiar from the bedroom. It's my friend from work. His tone casual, like he was standing right there. My blood ran cold. Elle was at the diner, working the late shift. I dropped him off myself at 6:45 p.m., his shift running until 7 a.m. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and called him. "You at work?" I asked, my voice tight. "Yeah," he said, confused, the clatter of the kitchen in the background. "Been here all night." I hung up, my breath shallow, and checked the camera again. Nothing. But the voice came again. "Hey," softer, Now, almost pleading from the bedroom, Shadow leapt off the couch, his fur bristling, and crept toward the hallway, stopping short, his eyes wide. I followed, my heart pounding, and stood at the bedroom door. The room was dark, the bed untouched, the window closed. I flicked on the light, my hand trembling, but it was empty. The voice didn't come again, but the air felt wrong, thick, with a presence I couldn't see. Shadow wouldn't cross the threshold, his body low, his gaze fixed on the corner. I backed out, locking the bedroom door, and dragged a blanket to the couch where I spent the night, my eyes on the hallway, my phone clutched tight. The next morning, I reviewed the camera feeds, desperate for proof. The porch light had stayed off the indoor cameras, showing nothing but Shadow's restless pacing. But the voices, Elle's call, they were real. Not in my head. I asked Elle if he'd called me, if he'd left a voicemail, but he shook his head, his face pale. I was slammed all night, he said. No time for calls. I didn't tell him about the voice, too scared to make it real. Shadow stayed close, his usual playfulness gone, his eyes always on the bedroom door. I've felt that energy before, not here, but years ago in my childhood home. My grandmother used to tell me about the visitors, as she called them, voices that mimicked her sister, calling her name from the attic. She'd hear footsteps, see lights flicker, but no one was ever there. One night, she followed the voice, only to find a cold spot in the attic, a chill that lingered for days. She burned herbs, whispered prayers, and the voices stopped. I thought it was just a story, a way to scare me. But now I wonder, is this thing in my apartment the same? A visitor that knows my name? My friend's voice. I don't sleep in the bedroom anymore. The couch is my bed, the TV my shield against the silence. The cameras still watch their lights blinking, but I don't trust them. They didn't catch the voices, the shadow, the thing that called me. Shadow stays by my side. His warmth, a small comfort, but even he feels it. His eyes on the darkness, waiting. It's out there or in here, and it's not done. Every flicker of light, every sound in the night reminds me it's watching, and I'm not alone. The bedroom door clicked shut, sealing me in a cocoon of quiet, but the weight of the bracelet on my wrist felt like a chain tethering me to something I couldn't name. I was 22, living with my aunt and uncle in their devoutly Christian home, a place where crosses hung on every wall and prayers filled the air. Their faith was a fortress, making the house feel like a sanctuary untouched by darkness. That night, I'd come from my boyfriend's place, his Latino family's warmth still lingering in my mind. He'd given me an old evil eye bracelet, a beaded trinket meant to ward off envy and malice, a tradition I didn't believe in. I grew up with hymns and scripture, not superstitions, but I wore it to please him, its cool beads brushing my skin as I slipped into bed. As the darkness closed in, a chill settled over me, sharp and sudden whispering that this night would be unlike any other. My boyfriend and I had been together less than a year. Our love fresh but fragile, bridging the gap between his vibrant culture and my reserved faith. His family spoke of the evil eye with reverence, explaining how the bracelet protected against bad intentions, breaking or vanishing when its work was done. I listened politely, my Christian upbringing dismissing it as folklore. But when he found the bracelet lost for months in a drawer and offered it to me, I couldn't say no. "It'll keep you safe," he said, his dark eyes earnest, and I smiled, slipping it on despite my doubts. The beads were worn, their blue and white pattern faded, but they felt oddly heavy, as if carrying a history I didn't know. I wore it home. The bracelet, a quiet passenger, its presence nagging at the edge of my thoughts. My aunt and uncle's house greeted me with its usual calm, the scent of lavender and polished wood, soothing my nerves. I prayed before bed, as always, and tucked myself under the covers, the bracelet still on, forgotten in my routine. Sleep came quickly, but it wasn't restful. The darkness of my room was absolute, a velvet void, unbroken by moonlight, and I sank into it, my body heavy, my mind adrift. Then a scream tore through the silence, my scream raw and desperate, ripping me from sleep. My limbs thrashed, tangled in the sheets, as a searing pain gripped my left arm, the one wearing the bracelet. Something was holding me, its grasp cold and unyielding fingers, like iron, digging into my flesh. I clawed at my arm with my free hand, panic flooding my veins, trying to reinforce my trapped limb to break free. My heart pounded, my breath ragged, as I fought against the invisible force, my screams echoing in the empty room. The bracelet burned against my skin, its beads pulsing with a heat that wasn't mine, and I felt a tug sharp and deliberate, as if whatever held me wanted to pull me into the dark. I shook it off, or it let go. I couldn't tell. My arm fell limp, throbbing, and I gasped, my eyes wide, staring into the pitch-black ceiling. The room was silent, but not empty. The air was thick, charged with a presence that pressed against my chest. Then, at the foot of my bed, something moved, a weight shifting, the mattress, sinking it down. My blanket tightened, pulled taut, and with a violent jerk, it was yanked toward the darkness. I gripped the fabric, my knuckles white, my body curled into itself, fighting to hold on. The force was relentless, pulling harder, as if determined to strip away my only shield. I screamed again, a primal sound, and the tug stopped the blanket, falling slack. I lay there frozen, my breath shallow, my eyes darting through the dark, searching for a shape, a sign, but seeing nothing. The bracelet felt heavier now, a shackle, its beads searing my wrist like a brand. Light was my only hope. My hand trembled as I reached for the remote on my nightstand, my fingers fumbling, afraid to move too fast, to provoke whatever lingered. I pressed the button, and the LED strips along my walls flared to life, flooding the room with stark white light. The darkness retreated, revealing my familiar space, pastel walls, a cluttered desk, a cross above my bed, but it felt violated, tainted. I scanned every corner under the bed, behind the curtains, expecting to find something, someone, but there was nothing. My arm ached. Red marks blooming where I'd been grabbed, faint but real, not a dream. I sat up, clutching my phone, scrolling mindlessly to anchor myself, but my eyelids grew heavy, my body betraying me. I left the lights on, too tired to fight sleep, and drifted off the bracelet still on my wrist, its presence a shadow in my mind. The morning brought no answers, only fear. I woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds, the room warm and ordinary, but the memory of the night clung to me like damp cloth. I tore the bracelet off in the shower, its beads clattering into my jewelry dish, and I didn't touch it again. The marks on my arm faded, but the dread didn't. I didn't tell my aunt or uncle they'd pray, maybe blame demons, but I wasn't sure what I believed anymore. My boyfriend was puzzled when I avoided his questions, his gift now a source of unease. I searched online, finding stories of cursed objects, of evil eye bracelets carrying spirits, but none matched the terror of that night. The house stayed safe, the bracelet untouched in its dish, and no other incidents followed. But I couldn't sleep there without checking the shadows, without feeling the weight of that grasp. Was it the bracelet, some dark energy attached to its past? Or was it my mind twisted by doubt? I'll never know, but I know I'll never wear it again. Never trust the dark. The scream of metal tore through the night, a car crash echoing down the winding mountain road. I was pregnant, curled in our tent with my husband, the campfire's embers, fading. We ran toward the sound, hearts pounding, expecting to help survivors. But in the dark, by a lonely restroom, a man waited, his smile too wide, his hands hidden, his words laced with menace. He wasn't here to save anyone. He was hunting, and we were his prey. My husband and I loved camping those stolen weekends, where the world's noise fell away, leaving only the crackle of fire and the whisper of trees. That summer, I was 6 months pregnant. My belly, a gentle curve, our excitement for our first child, tempered by the physical strain. We'd chosen a remote site high in the mountains, a place known for its wild beauty, but also its treacherous roads, narrow winding, with cliffs that dropped into darkness. The campsite was sparse, just a few tents scattered along a dirt loop, the air sharp with pine, and the promise of solitude. We'd set up our tent near the edge, a small fire warming our hands as we laughed about baby names and planned our future. It was late, maybe 10 p.m., when the crash shattered the quiet. A screech of tires, then a sickening crunch of metal against rock, so loud it seemed to shake the ground. My husband and I froze, eyes meeting in shared alarm. "Someone's hurt," I said, my voice tight. Without a word, we grabbed flashlights and jackets, adrenaline surging. I moved slower, my pregnancy making each step deliberate, but urgency drove me. The road was a half-mile away, a steep climb through underbrush, the night so dark our beams barely cut through. We reached the wreckage at the same time as a police car, its red and blue lights pulsing like a heartbeat. A sedan was crumpled against a boulder, steam hissing from its hood. The officer took our names, noting we'd seen nothing but heard the impact, and sent us back, promising to handle it. Relief mixed with unease as we retraced our steps. The crash replayed in my mind, the violence of it unsettling. I needed to pee, a constant pregnancy demand, so we detoured to the only open restroom. A concrete bunker past our site, unlit and isolated. The area was deserted. Other campers tucked away the darkness, absolute beyond our flashlight's reach. As I stepped out of the stall, my husband waiting by the door, I noticed a flicker of light behind him, a beam bouncing wildly, someone sprinting toward us. I chuckled, assuming it was a camper in a rush, but the figure stopped abruptly, a man in a hoodie, his face half lit by his flashlight. "Wow, you guys are fast," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, his smile stretching too wide, too wrong. My stomach sank, a primal warning flaring. His eyes gleamed unblinking, and his hands stayed buried in his hoodie pocket, fidgeting with something I couldn't see. My husband, ever calm, explained we'd run to the crash, worried about victims. The man nodded his smile, unchanging, and said, "I'm used to this kind of stuff." His tone was casual, like he was chatting about the weather, but it chilled me. Used to, what I snapped, irritation, masking my growing fear. He shrugged, ignoring me, and asked if we were leaving tomorrow. His question felt invasive, a probe for weakness. I lied, saying, "We're meeting the cops soon for statements," the words spilling out unbidden, a desperate shield. He didn't react, just kept smiling, his hands still moving in that pocket. My husband sensed my panic, agreeing. We needed to go, but the man stepped forward as we backed away, matching our retreat with slow, deliberate strides. He rambled about a morning walk, finding flowers, but hearing a strange growl ending with, "You never know what day's gonna be your last." My blood ran cold. I saw it then. A knife's handle glinting in his pocket, his grip tightening. "Run!" I screamed my voice, raw instinct taking over. My husband grabbed my hand, and we fled our flashlights, swinging his beam, chasing us erratic and relentless. The path to our tent was too obvious, so we veered into the woods, branches snagging my clothes, my breath ragged. My pregnancy slowed me each step, a fight, but fear drove me forward. "Flowers don't growl," I sobbed, the realization hitting. His story was a lure, a predator's tale. His flashlight's beam danced over us, his footsteps crunching closer. That smile burned into my memory. We cut through dense trees, aiming for the police at the crash site, knowing the road would have been a trap. Glancing back, I saw him at the road's edge, his face twisted in disappointment, as if he'd expected us to take the shorter path. Then he was gone, his light vanishing the woods, swallowing him. We reached the police, gasping, and told them everything. They searched, but found no trace, no man, no knife, just our fear-soaked story. We packed our tent at dawn, driving home in silence, the mountain's beauty, now a mask for horror. Weeks passed, but the memory festered. 2 years later, I posted about it on TikTok, a cathartic release, and it went viral. A stranger messaged me, linking a news article. 2 weeks after our encounter, a man matching his description killed a camper at a nearby site, stabbing a man to death and wounding a woman who survived by playing dead. My heart shattered relief at closure, drowned by guilt, knowing he'd killed because he wasn't caught after us. Camping is dead to me now, its joy stolen. I see his smile in every shadow, feel his gaze in every quiet night. Was he just A drifter? A killer drawn to the wild? Or something darker? A predator who thrived on fear? I carry a gun now, sleep with lights on, and check every lock. The mountains hold their secrets, but I know one truth. We escaped death that night, but it followed us home. Every flicker of a campfire, every rustle in the dark, brings back his knife, his smile, and the certainty that he's still out there, waiting for his next hunt.